Okay. Hello, everyone, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and thank you for joining us today from wherever you are. My name is Sarah Demy, and I am the founder and CEO of Demy-Colton, and I am located here in New York City. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the 11th installment of the Demy-Colton Virtual Salon Series. Today's topic is Metabesity, a healthcare burden on the rise. As some of you know, Demy-Colton's mission is all about convening biopharma and digital medicine industry leaders to catalyze change. We know we help drive innovation when we bring individuals together who are united by a common cause and a shared passion. And in our industry, that common cause and passion is bringing therapeutics and cures to people in need. As those of you who have attended past salons know, Demy-Colton was in the process of launching BioFuture, our new international business development and investor conference right here in New York City, when COVID-19 interfered and changed our plans. So in lieu of an in-person BioFuture meeting, we launched the Demy-Colton Virtual Salon Series to continue our mission of bringing people together with great content. Before we get underway, I would like to acknowledge and thank all of our sponsors for their support during this uncertain time. It's really, truly appreciated. At Demy-Colton, we believe the Virtual Salon Series will be here to stay even after we get beyond COVID and get back to a new normal, whatever that new normal is. I invite you to please check our website for the schedule of salons, fireside chats, topics, and participants. It is evolving constantly, and of course, I encourage you to join us at future events. A brief note about the structure of today's program. The formal portion of the discussion will last approximately 50 minutes and will be followed by a 15-minute Q&A period. You can submit questions in the Ask a Question pane below the screen, and we will address as many as possible. Of course, it is easier to address questions if they are as concise as possible. Please note that this salon will be recorded and will be available for on-demand viewing a little bit later on today. Now, to the program. As I mentioned earlier, the title of today's virtual salon is Metabesity, a healthcare burden on the rise. Our moderator is Emmy Gonzalez of Social Starts and Joyanne's Partners, and she is joined by John Brooks of Healthcare Capital, Tomas Land of Novo Nordisk, Chris Lento of Noom, and Kamanthi Stem of Gluco. Welcome all. We are delighted all of you can join us. And I would like now to briefly introduce everyone. Your full bios or their full bios are available on our website, so these will be briefer. Our moderator, Emmy Gonzalez, is the Senior Principal for Social Starts and Joyanne's Partners, spearheading investments in the Boston area. Her main areas of investment interest include healthcare, life sciences, and biotechnology. Prior to Joyanne's Partners and Social Starts, she founded a diabetes digital health company, consulted for Half Court Ventures, an early-stage VC firm, and was the director for Harvard's premier undergraduate competition, the i3 Innovation Challenge. John Brooks is managing director of Healthcare Capital, which advises early-stage life sciences companies. He was recently CEO and president of a phase 3 biotechnology company and managed a successful reverse merger. John is the former president, CEO, and chairman of the Joslin Diabetes Center there in Boston, here in Boston, and has co-founded 7 life sciences companies. He was also a co-founder of Prism Venture Partners, a $1.25 billion venture capital firm. Tomas Lant is Innovation Sourcing Vice President and Senior Principal Search and Evaluation Scientist with Novo Nordisk. He was previously Director of Strategy and Innovation. Hold on just one minute. Forgive me for this. I have everything set up on this system, And I just touched something and it sped back to the beginning. Okay, Tomas is currently responsible for evaluation of external innovation regarding all aspects of diabetes, rare blood diseases, and endocrine disorders. In addition, he works closely with the teams responsible for assessing innovation in the other therapy areas of Novo, including obesity, NASH, and cardiovascular disease. Chris Lento is head of healthcare strategic partners at Noom, a newly created business unit working to establish partnerships with top life sciences organizations. Chris brings 28 years of diversified healthcare experience. To this position, he has held senior roles in digital health companies, including Pear Therapeutics and Palo Alto Health Sciences. Kamanthi Stem is the Chief Operating Officer at Gluco, a digital diabetes care management company, where she is leading the evolution of scaling of the connected care platform to meet the rising post-COVID-19 market demand for telehealth and virtual trials. Kamanthi has more than 25 years experience working at both startups and global biopharma companies. As a strategic innovation leader at Genentech, she led the first decentralized clinical trial that sparked the founding of two digital health startups, Science 37 and Monarch Bionetworks. So without further ado and interruption, I would like to turn the virtual podium over to Emmy and our panel. We hope that everyone will join us when we can finally launch BioFuture in person in New York City. Emmy.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for those kind words and those long introductions. It was wonderful for all of us to hear a little bit more information about ourselves. But I would love to kind of briefly reintroduce, kind of put name to face and to bio a little bit. So I will reintroduce myself, and then I will want each of our panelists to reintroduce ourselves very briefly, just so that we can put kind of name to bio a little bit. So my name is Emmy Gonzalez. I am the senior principal for Social Starts, where we invest in the science of health and happiness, and Joyon's Partners, where we invest in delightful moments, global fund, global mandate, and one of the most active earlier stage investment funds globally. And with that, if we can go first to Chris, if you could just briefly reintroduce yourself, that'd be lovely. Thank you so much. One second, Chris, I don't know if we can hear you. Maybe we'll figure out.
There we go.
Yo.
Can you hear me now? Sorry about that. I thought you were going to pull me off mute. Hi, I'm Chris Lento, head of the healthcare partnership team at Noom. Thank you for the opportunity to join the panel today. For those that are not familiar with Noom, we are a digital behavioral change company based in New York City with offices in Seoul, Korea, and Japan. And we are focusing on delivering digital evidence-based solutions to both consumers and life science partners, with the thinking that using digital can hit on both physical and behavioral health components of serious meta-obesity medical conditions and diagnoses. Happy to be here today and glad to be a part of the panel.
Thank you so much, Chris. Maybe up next, let's go over to John.
Hello, great to be part of the panel. As you heard, I've spent a better part of my career in the, diabetes, cardiometabolic, metabesity space. And I work with a lot of really exciting young companies that are trying to bring solutions to bear to solve this highly interdisciplinary and kind of complicated disease state. So one of them in particular is a company called L-Nutra. I'm helping them with their business development efforts right now around having foods that basically mimic being on a diet or support intermittent fasting. So again, I think nutrition is a critical theme as we think about, how do we get our arms around this condition?
Thank you so much, John. Tomas, let's go over to you.
Thank you, Emmy, and thanks for having me on this exciting panel. So I'm Thomas. I've been with the company now close to 20 years, and most of that time I spent in the diabetes area. I've had the pleasure to meet many of the people involved in this before, or I've had interactions with them. Novo Nordisk is really focusing on trying to defeat diabetes today. I think it's the mantra that we have is that we live our purpose to defeat diabetes, to provide access, prevention, and innovation into the treatment paradigms of future diabetes treatments. I think that's extremely important, and I'm proud to be helping with that to the extent we ever can.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Thomas. And Kamati, last but very much not least.
Thank you, Emmy. It's great to be part of this very important panel. I started my career actually in the pharma life science space and doing a lot of research. And in my early years, I was actually working in diabetes in a variety of different therapeutic areas. And about 10 years ago, I think I got exposed to the potential of digital transformation of healthcare and of research, and became quite fascinated with that and followed that pathway, as you said earlier, in starting a couple of startup companies in the digital health space. But recently, about a year ago, joined Gluco. And Gluco was an early pioneer in really trying to figure out how can we take the digital tools that are being provided to collect data and transform that into a way that's usable not only by the patient, but also by the clinicians and the researchers around them. And so Gluco is a connected care data management platform that helps patients living with diabetes and their related chronic conditions to collaborate better. And collaboration is at the core of what we do. There's a lot of data that's being generated from a variety of different devices, but how do we capture that, simplify it, and use it in a way that's simple, both for the patients to make decisions every day, or the people living with chronic conditions, but also for clinicians to be able to see that data that's being generated outside of the clinic, and for researchers. And that's why it's very important. We actually partner very closely with Thomas and the Novo team to generate new tools and new treatments that can benefit these patients. But at the core of what we do is collaboration, whether it's with patients or clinicians or caregivers or the many researchers that are fighting the battle, if you will, for diabetes and metabesity.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful. No, and I am so blessed to be here with the panel with such diversity in terms of thought, experience, expertise. And so I'm really excited to really dive into metabesity. So to begin, I think it may be a good starting point to have a common definition set up amongst this panel. So the way that we're identifying and defining metabesity is a constellation of the major chronic diseases with metabolic roots affecting an aging population. It's on the rise globally. It's a societal burden. It's a mix of chronic, non-communicable diseases. It's staggering and it's growing, as we said, both here in the US and around the world. So metabesity encompasses different diseases such as diabetes, cancer, obesity, neurodegenerative diseases, and aging, among others. This common root of having these metabolic roots may be susceptible to common solutions. So without further ado, let's kind of dive into these questions and ask these expert panelists more information and have a really wonderful discussion about metabesity. So the first question that we have is that we see between members in our panel how collaborative the industry is, right? Between Noom and Novartis and Gluco. How can we envision these collaborations to improve outcomes for metabesity particularly?
So I'm very happy to chip in on that to start with, and of course invite everyone else to do the same. So I think it's important at Novo Nordisk, we came to the realization very early on that 99%, if not even 99.9% of innovation in this area occurs outside Novo Nordisk premises. that is a fantastic starting point. And it's such a complex disease, metabesity. Diabetes on its own is very complex, and the complications of it even more many times. This requires collaboration. It requires partnerships, and not only with one or two partners. As we've heard here, we have a partnership with Chris and Noom, and we have a partnership with Gluco. We have numerous partnerships on the treatment paradigms, so the pharmaceutical interventions, the digital healthcare interventions, and means to help. It's something that we could never have lifted alone, and I want to stress that. And John and I have had numerous discussions over the years on various types of partnerships, and that is it's part of this landscape. Is really that we need to do this together. There's not one single company that have the solutions to this. We really need your help out there as innovators and as solvers to digital health problems, etc., etc. This is really a key aspect, and we work very hard in trying to put all the pieces together.
Yeah, I might just add, one quick perspective. I think as we said at the beginning, your definition, this is really a constellation of all these different diseases and conditions that have metabolic roots. And I think, there's an opportunity along the lines that Thomas said, but to really think beyond just diabetes, but look at cardiovascular, kind of look at cancer, look at a whole plethora of specialties and companies in those specialties, because again, it's going to take kind of this collaborative effort to be able to tap into experiences across a whole range of companies, a whole range of clinical specialties, and in some ways to make sure we have an opportunity to, kind of have the healthcare profession, regulatory authorities understand that, again, this is multidisciplinary disease, not just kind of one disease that they've never heard of.
Demy, I would add to that, along with the multidisciplinary, is the one collaborator that we often miss is the actual people living with the condition. And that's where I think, Gluco has really focused on the data that's being generated, whether it's in the clinic or outside the clinic. It's all sitting in silos and sometimes in different standards. And one of the focuses of Gluco is to bring that together. We're in like 7,500 clinics in 26 countries, and they're all generating this data. And how do we bring it together along with others, connect that data, and be able to generate insights? And that's why we really like to belong to different data sharing consortiums where we can bring different data sets together and generate new insights into the progression of disease or the prevention of disease. And can we really understand these new interventions, whether they're new drugs, devices, or even just digital and behavioral interventions?
Yeah, I guess I'll just pick up the rear here, and I agree with everything the panel has said so far. I see collaboration from technology and pharmaceutical, biotech, and medical device companies to be clearly synergistic. There are things that the larger healthcare-focused companies can do that Noom simply cannot do. And to achieve our mission, which is to help people everywhere become healthier, we're going to need partners to do that, to do it at large scale. So I relish all the work that this panel does with their groups, and Komati, your work is very similar to ours, and I think we all have a similar mission here. It's to keep the end patient in mind and improve healthcare globally.
No, thank you so much for all that, and I completely agree. Metabesity is a complex disease, and with complex diseases, sometimes you need kind of all-encompassing solutions, right? And as y'all said, there could be a digital side, it could be a therapeutic side, it could be a device side. And maybe collectively amongst all these different solutions, there could be something that really helps and benefits the patients at the end of the day, right? And again, what you said, Komati, really resonated with me about the data, right? Again, there's so many data sources, but also the patients themselves have so much data of themselves, right? And so how do you use data in a way that benefits everyone, right? Because if everyone has their own little independent data, everything is so it's so dispersed that doesn't really kind of unify and help, I think, ultimately the patients, which is what we all want, right? Is to find solutions and therapies, and something that really kind of benefits the metabesity aspects as a whole. So that's, yeah, totally agree with that. So for the second question I have is metabesity itself. Is it anchored in diabetes? Is it anchored in obesity? Is it anchored perhaps in another, right? Another kind of category or bucket? How do you all see and identify metabesity within the current nomenclature that is used today?
Yeah, I'm happy to kick things off. In some ways, we may not fully know, kind of what the specific driver is. Again, just given the fact that this is a, kind of constellation of different conditions, but they do all have, as you said at the outset, metabolic roots. So at the end of the day, something is happening to one's, physiologic metabolic state, that there's some aberration. Maybe it's coming from genetics. It could be coming from the environment, lifestyle, food, behavior. But at the end of the day, it starts causing kind of this domino effect of, one condition kind of leading to the next condition and starting to basically have a impact on that patient as a whole. So, maybe one of the real keys as we think about this is understanding more about what is the mechanism or mechanisms, and more importantly, is there some way we can get ahead of them, thinking about prevention? Is there some way to understand, what is kind of the most significant driver that leads to further, issues?
Yeah, I'll jump in second. I mean, we know that metabesity is a disruption of efficient metabolic processes, right? And you'll see the words glucose and insulin and inflammation and dysregulation of lipids all coming together, hence the definition meta-obesity, lots of different things impacting at the same time. So yeah, I absolutely agree, John. It's a complex one for sure.
So I might chip in here, and I heard you say it already, John, but I think it's extremely important that we look at the patient in whole. It's fine and necessary to treat the glucose dysregulation. That's absolutely important, and the same thing with weight management and interventions of that. But doing that without having a better communication between the hepatologist and the gastroenterologist and the endocrinologist, I think we need to communicate better between these professions as well. And we shouldn't forget the kidney. The kidney, that's also a very, very important organ in metabolic diseases of this kind, as metabesity is defined here. So I think it's really about looking at the whole patient. And I also would like to add that is really what's driving Novo Nordisk's new strategy so we have recently added beyond diabetes and obesity to our therapeutic areas. We have added the cardiovascular, the chronic heart failure and atherosclerosis. We added NASH, as most of you probably know. So the liver disease is of focus, but also the kidney disease is in focus. And this is really trying to at least from a pharmaceutical interventional point of view, building on the whole patient perspective here.
And I would just add to that whole patient perspective, we also need to take into consideration the social determinants that an individual grows up in. The environment, it often starts very early, as well as the environment, the stress, the different things that they have that impact their health that could be beyond just genetics and so forth. So that holistic view of the patient is now, we're able to do this. We have tools now that can capture some of that data that we historically couldn't. With digital tools, we're in the patient's pocket 24/7, and there's so much we can learn from that. But there is a challenge in creating better data sharing and the concerns around data sharing, and all of that we need to figure out in order to really get to that holistic view. And I also think there's a lot we can learn from in the oncology space, where they've really taken into that view of the personalized medicine I think we could do that in metabesity as well, not just from a genetic standpoint, but from a holistic, all the environmental things and behaviorals of a patient, and that all plays into a customized approach for every single patient.
Yeah, I mean, I wish we could have, one-stop shop for everything, right? Like personalized solution combined with, addressing all these social determinants of health, which I think are super significant, along with some form of therapeutic, along with some kind of device, right? But it seems really, really amazing. But I think we're taking these proactive steps, one step at a time to get to that holy grail. And I think y'all really touched on a few points, I think, as well. On John, I think you touched on it a little bit, and Kamathi too, about this involvement of nature versus nurture, or genetics versus the environment and metabesity, right? And how do y'all see kind of the involvement or the integration of these two components and affecting metabesity, both as a disease and ways to approach it as a solution?
Yeah, again, I'm happy to start. I think a lot of things we've learned about diabetes are certainly going to be relevant to metabesity. So we know that, there's lots of contributors, if you will, from a genetic standpoint. Even there's evidence that babies in the womb could be, in fact, predisposed to develop type 2 diabetes at some point. So again, I think we understand that your genes certainly play a significant role in terms of your propensity, likelihood, or risk factors of developing, some aspect of metabesity. But, I think we also know that, basically the environment, basically whether it's the food people eat, there's evidence in certain parts of the world. If you really look at the explosion of diabetes in Southeast Asia, there's evidence that the food and the water are contributing factors to drive inflammation that then drives insulin resistance. So, I think there's lessons that in the diabetes space, which has been researched very well, that should help inform, how does that affect this, expansion into other conditions? How do other organs get affected? And again, I think, we're just starting to think about how to, as Tomas said, how do you bring together these different specialties and medical divisions and get them to kind of, think holistically around the patient? Because right now, a lot of medicine is still organ specific. I'll treat your kidney, I'll treat your pancreas, I'll treat your heart, but, there's an opportunity to try to tie it all together. So I think that, that would be important as we try to get our arms around, as you said, nature versus nurture.
So I might just add to that. I think it was very well put, John. There's beyond the lifestyle, it's also other factors that are affecting, like sleep deprivation, and we know that there are those factors, and I think that a device like Noom can, that system can help in addressing some of those stress situations in people's life. And I also would like to add that. There are progressors that we don't understand. There are people living with overweight and are perfectly healthy from a metabesity point of view. There are people that are having liver steatosis and never progress into something more severe, even though they have diabetes and are obese. There are people that are having, a very quick involvement of severe liver disease and NASH. They're fast progressors of this. And we don't, at least I do not, speaking for myself, I do not understand the reasons why. And I have never read anyone explaining it good enough, at least. So, and this we need to understand, who are the fast progressors, because these are life-threatening diseases. We talk about them a little bit somehow, sometimes as lifestyle changes. We can intervene with devices and everything, but there are those people with this type of indications that are really coming into a life-threatening situation. And this we should never forget. So we need to understand who are at risk for that severe liver disease, the severe kidney disease, and not at least the heart failure.
Yeah.
Tomasz, I totally agree with you. And I think this is where, again, the digital tools that we have now can really help us monitor. Remote patient monitoring is now really, it's not a vision of the future. It's here, and we can actually monitor patients every second and be able to, triage and have those check engine lights, if you will, that shine up, and then the clinicians who are right now, and all of the healthcare providers that are very overburdened, even despite COVID, they were pretty overburdened before that. They can now actually direct their attention to those fast progressors or those that are most in need. And we have tools now that can actually help us do that. And we have reimbursement that can actually support a sustainable business model to do that. So we really need to accelerate our healthcare to adopt these new ways and these new tools that are available to them.
I'll clean up again. It's hard to go fourth because you all make such great points, but I think I would focus on the part, I think we all know that people are genetically predisposed to all of these meta-obesity conditions. There is some thinking on Noom's end that if we can do this earlier and more often, that there is a preventative component to some of this, or a delaying factor. And it's been mentioned, but sleep, stress, fatigue, better nutrition, coaching, and support can all aid and possibly ward off or prevent the progression of some of these serious cardiometabolic or meta-obesity conditions as well.
Yeah, and y'all mentioned an interesting point about these progressors, right? And so, is the goal here to identify who the progressors are and really focus on that core population, or to diagnose? Is there some kind of biomarker or something like that that helps us predict before these progressors occur and try to treat them holistically or whatever before the onset of the disease? It's a tricky question. I know there's no right answer. I'm just thinking where your thoughts are here.
But Amy, I think it's a great question. I work with a lot of young companies, and in fact, I think, some of them are really trying to understand, as you're saying, is there an opportunity, you'd almost call it, for digital biomarkers that are using wearable smart devices, sensors, and can that information inform, decisions about, where that patient is progressing? Is there an opportunity to try to start seeing maybe there's some decomposition in their overall health, and to try to, get some sort of interaction interceding beforehand? So, I think there's a lot of activity where, especially a lot of young companies are leveraging the fact that data is coming out of all these devices. How do you take that data, turn it into actionable intelligence that then helps support, decision support, helps to inform, the care team and the patient that, they need to do something different. So, I see companies doing it in the heart failure space, other companies doing it certainly in diabetes. So I think there's a whole movement to basically get, I call them, digital biomarkers to drive opportunities to get ahead of, waiting for someone to have an acute condition, then we respond. We can certainly get involved much earlier.
Yeah, and maybe I think this whole shift, right? There's so much capital being invested in very reactionary care, right? And so I guess maybe it was myself wanting to get my own answer. But maybe perhaps we can focus on more preventative care, right? Take care of the problem before it actually becomes a problem, if that's possible, right? And very understanding that perhaps that's not the case for everyone. But if we could do that for some, maybe it will, be better down the line, economically, financially, and just as a person, right? But anyways, that was a little curveball of a question. The next question I have for you all is that metabesity right now is a relatively full encompassing term with the FDA, and the FDA has not yet been able to accept metabesity as a full encompassing term. So, what are the causes and implications of this, right? Do we treat different aspects of metabesity, such as diabetes or obesity, or should we try to look at solutions that treat metabesity as a whole, specifically with the FDA? So, Thomas, I don't know if you want to start with this.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Amy. I think it's a very tricky question, actually. I understand why FDA has not, and I've not at all been involved in any discussions with the authorities to any extent in trying to push for metabesity being an acceptance. But we had a similar kind of situation with the metabolic syndrome. And you know, I think the term resonates very well with the panelists. I can see that, and there is a challenge in these multifactorial diseases to accept what are the endpoints. So you know, you have to have endpoints in clinical studies that's no doubt about that. And we have to keep in mind the patient's safety all the time. And therefore, endpoints and safety studies must be very well controlled. We look at, of course, we can't do damage to the liver when we treat the diabetes. That's a given safety endpoint, of course. You always test for that. And the same thing, if you treat the kidney, chronic kidney disease, you have to make sure that you do that without dysregulating the glucose, of course. So in a sense, we are taking parts of this, but not the totality. But the parts of it, we are taking a responsible action, I think, in the clinical regulatory studies need for progressing the development of medicine. That is my view on this. I'm not sure that it causes you know, any issues for Novo Nordisk as such. I do not believe that.
Emmy, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. Come with you first.
I was just going to say, I wonder if there is, I think it's a really good question on how do we accelerate the research for new treatments. I wonder if we could take a lesson from the playbooks in oncology when they started with organ-based protocols and now they're going to more umbrella protocols that are more tumor-based, mutation-based. And there may be something there that we could learn from. Maybe we need to do some more umbrella-type protocols that cover different conditions in metabesity, as well as maybe there's I think it's really important to do more observational research, more real-world data research to understand and develop better endpoints in this space.
And that is, the industry is taking irresponsible action there because we're doing more and more real-world evidence studies, and I think that is here to stay. We'll see more of that. Absolutely, I could not agree more, Kamal.
Yeah, really great points. And moving outside of the clinical side of this, you know, we have seen FDA clear drugs and devices for obesity, for type 2 diabetes. What keeps me up at night a little is the wondering of, once drugs are approved, the reimbursement systems that may exist to allow patients to actually receive new technology. And both sides of our government here in the US aren't exactly aligned on innovation and reimbursement. They don't always come at the same time. So that worries me. If the clinical side speeds up and the business side is lacking a little behind, do we create a bigger issue or a bigger quagmire, if you will?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that this is no easy question, right? I mean, just let's just take diabetes as a start. There's a significant difference, even what's going on within the body, between type 1 and type 2, right? And then there's a difference between that and obesity, and there's a difference between that and oncology, and there's a difference between that and aging. So I think, you know, here I think that can we find a common thread, right? And try to address kind of all these different diseases and indications once, of course, they've happened, if we don't take the preventative approach, of course, to then kind of find a common thread and see, you know, can we find different types of solutions that tackle more than one indication at a time? But I think, Matthew, what you said is a really smart point, right? Let's look at other spaces such as oncology, see how they've done it, and maybe we can replicate it here in the metabesity space, as it's still a really novel and nascent term that we're still kind of all synthesizing ourselves, right?
Yeah, one of the other challenges in metabesity research is we have very, very large sample sizes in our trials. And again, coming back to how can we leverage more real world data to reduce maybe the control arm of the trial? Could we generate external control arms like oncology has done? So there's some other techniques I think that we should be looking at in trying to adopt. Same thing as like virtual trials. How can we broaden access for more patients to participate in trials by leveraging some of these new ways of working, which COVID has nicely put some winds under our sails around it, and the agency has developed new guidances for us to do research in more innovative ways. But we still need all of us to be willing to take the first step and adopt these new ways of working and be able to try some of these new methods.
I might just add one comment. An organization called WNICE, the Worldwide Network for Innovation in Cardiovascular Education and Research, and literally just started a cardiac oncology initiative because historically, there just hasn't been an awful lot of cross-pollination interaction between those disciplines. And I think, Matthew, as you're saying, in fact, we're starting to understand people that are on chemotherapy sometimes end up developing diabetes. So I think there's just starting to be a renewed or maybe a new opportunity where you're getting these different specialties to start sharing information, understanding, again, from a patient perspective. It's kind of what you said, Thomas, something I'm doing here, how does it affect this other aspect of a patient's health condition? So again, surprisingly, that whole cardiology, oncology interaction really hasn't taken place.
We need a tumor board for Metabesity.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I'll jump in on the oncology side. Noom is doing some extensive research with cancer patients. And aside from the psychosocial elements that are needed for patients who are managing a cancer diagnosis, there is an obesity factor that comes into play as well for a good percentage of those patients. So we think we have a nice opportunity to partner with pharma or do this alone to hit on both the psychosocial and physical aspects of a cancer diagnosis.
Yeah, and I just might add the other company I mentioned, L-Nutra, we actually have a nutrition solution, if you will, where people that are ready to undergo chemotherapy, basically go on this, Prolon diet, and literally it basically makes the cancer cells more likely to basically be affected by the chemotherapy, and it kind of protects your normal cells. So again, there's some early work showing that, nutrition plays an important role in cancer treatment and, protecting, if you will, healthy cells while you're undergoing those type of treatments.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And so, and I agree about nutrition, but again, going back to Kamathi's point about the social determinants of health, right? Like access to healthy food sometimes is not available for certain people, right? Sometimes healthier food tends to be more expensive, right? And so, again, this is tackling such a large problem, but there's these very important other factors that do play a role in people's health and metabesity aspects too, that I think is important to be considered and noted at this point, right?
Well, education and awareness is really important in prevention. And I come back to, I became really hopeful about the ability to transform healthcare 10 years ago when the light bulb went out for me that there is a tool now in everyone's pocket 24/7, and they're looking at it all the time, that we can leverage to better educate and increase awareness around nutrition and reducing some of the health disparities that we currently exist in our country and in the globe right now. And I just think we need to leverage it more to improve that.
Yeah, and Chris, with Noom. Go ahead. Sorry, Thomas.
Yeah, again, you guys are all making such great points. I can't help but point out, I'm not sure if a question is going to come in, how COVID is impacting all of this as well. It's a huge impact for us at Noom. We've recently launched a Healthy Mind program to complement our Healthy Lifestyle or Healthy Weight program. So I'm really personally and professionally interested in the mental and behavioral health side of this equation, and that people are really struggling through all of the issues that are, we're all challenged with in 2020. So just ask that everybody keep that in mind as well.
think COVID has been a really interesting experience for us at Gluco in that it really, I think, emphasized for people that remote care can still deliver really good care. When COVID hit, Gluco offered our remote care for free for any clinic that wanted to use it. And many clinics took advantage of that, and they were able to maintain continuity of care with their patients and actually reduce the risk of them needing to come in. Great, but that should be, an experience that continues post-COVID. Why do patients need to come in all the time? Why can't they have the telehealth consultation along with their data being streamed in virtually versus having to come into every clinic? And then it comes back to this whole remote patient monitoring. Why do we have scheduled visits? Why not have visits when you need them? And if you're being constantly monitored, and we have tools and technology to do that now, then that makes us a more efficient healthcare system in totality.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, Chris, that I thought about is, the effects of COVID on metabesity, right? Being outside sometimes is even difficult, right? And we've kind of, gyms are, closed or temporarily, restricted or whatever. And so I think that, again, like society does play such an important part within our health, right? And especially due to COVID, there are a lot of these limitations, as well as financially, right? The unemployment rate is skyrocketing and things like that. So, and healthcare access sometimes is decreased. And so, I think that there's all these kinds of factors that I think one of the best solutions that I at least personally know of is remote patient monitoring, right? It tends to be fairly more inexpensive and greater access. More people can access it, right? So those are kind of my kind of 2 cents on that topic. I don't know if there's any other kind of additional comments on that. Okay. Awesome. And so,
sorry. I just hope that all the positives that are coming out from these advancements in technology and healthcare, as has been mentioned, do continue past COVID. They need to stay. Reimbursement needs to continue. All the technology companies need to continue to bring innovation forward because we're making progress. It's clear.
I think that absolutely the reimbursement that has been there and really underutilized around the use of remote patient monitoring and the reimbursement that exists, and more reimbursement, and it's getting better. There still seems to be a little bit of a hesitancy to use it and to leverage it in the provider space. So I think we need to resolve that. What's causing that friction? What's causing them not to use this more?
Yeah, I would just add, I think it's evidence, right? So part of it is a lot of providers like to see, journal articles, peer review articles, clinical studies. So a little bit of it is, having outcomes data, which, I think people working on it, but that does tend to be a factor in what I call clinical inertia.
Yeah. I think at Gluco, we've generated some really great evidence around improved outcomes. We've even shown churn data, meaning when a patient stops using the platform, their outcomes actually worsen. We've generated, evidence around that, and we're continuing to do it. And I agree with you. I think this is where we can all partner together to generate more evidence to help people realize the value of remote patient monitoring, both to them as a provider as well as the patient.
Yeah. We have entire teams of people focused on engaging and empowering our users and patients, and our work with the life science companies. It's all about engagement and keeping people in tune and connected to their own health. I mean, that's the equation we're trying to solve for.
Yeah. No, definitely.
I think it's important also to add that of course, a lot of innovation in aspects of curing parts of this, curing diabetes. I mean, there's a whole artificial pancreas society. There's a lot of people working on that, stem cell therapies and so on. And I think we should not forget those also that are ultimately, hopefully, going to cure at least the diabetes aspects of it. But there are also companies working on set point theories of obesity, etc., to really bring them back to normal weight. And we, I think we need all these innovative companies and people come together, and there is preventive aspects of what Komathi and Chris does, and I think that will enhance current therapy use, and in a strong way. There are good arguments for that. But we should not forget that we ultimately want to defeat these diseases and cure them. I think that's really a key.
Yeah.
No, of course.
And there's a real sense of urgency around, doing trials faster so we can get treatments too. But that requires us to engage more patients to participate, and in models that are easier for them to participate. Our trials are very burdensome for many patients to participate in, so we need to make them simpler and easier.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think in the last, 6 to 10 months, I think there's been a lot of progress moving forward. And I think that is just, how do we keep the momentum and really kind of find things that actually work for people. So the last question I have for everyone, in a more optimistic note, what are the areas of Metabesity that you're most excited about? Where do you see the most potential? It could be something related to your work or not, either would work. So maybe Chris can start, or John.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question. I probably can answer it a dozen ways. I think personally, I'm most interested in the personalization behind this. Could we start doing things one-on-one and more personalized and much more holistically? I totally see the value in pharmaceutical intervention and device intervention. But wondering, as that continues, what are the things we can do to really create a specific program, device, drug, program for patients as we move forward, and do it at scale and cost effectively, most important.
Yeah, I would say, in some ways, the opportunity to, have this panel, and I know there's other programs that are starting to really put, Metabesity on the map, because again, I think it's an opportunity to educate everybody on the, the nature of this constellation of related diseases that are driven by metabolic processes. And, I think there's an opportunity to then understand, the role that, whether it's biotech, pharmaceutical, device, digital health, analytic, nutrition, food, behavioral aspects. I mean, it all comes together. And I think the most important thing is to have more of these type of opportunities and forums and meetings where, different people, different disciplines inform each other, and hopefully insights and innovation comes out of that.
I would pile on maybe to say, I think what's most exciting is the realization that it is a multidisciplinary problem and that many players are ready to collaborate. When I first started in this industry, it was pretty siloed. Everyone was very focused on their own IP and they didn't really want to share. I'm really seeing that opening up, and we're in a world where sharing and collaborating is what's going to really accelerate our ability to fight this kind of multidisciplinary disease.
So what excites me the most is really that what Komathi said here, we're coming together. I think that's really a key aspect in helping each other here. The second one that is really been a game changer is, of course, the cardiovascular outcome studies, and that we finally have options that are actually improving cardiovascular health in this patient population. I think that is fantastic good news for everyone affected with these diseases. At later stage than maybe where we apply these devices and interventions that we have discussed today, but nevertheless, that is just an absolutely terrific progress that the industry, together with a lot of other actors, of course, have made.
Of course. Yeah. So I just wanted to summarize a couple of the core themes that we discussed today in Metabesity. One is treating the patient as a whole. 2, needing customization and personalization of care is really important. 3, shifting from sick care to preventative care. And lastly, as we've seen, we all love to collaborate, and collaboration here in the industry is key to really continue progressing and moving things forward. So thank you all so much, John, Chris, Tomas, and Komathi. Thank you all so much for an incredible panel. And thank you, Sarah, and the rest of the team at Demy-Colton for inviting us. Thank you all so much.
Oh, it is my pleasure. It's my pleasure. We do have a lot of questions that have been coming in, so stay tuned. For those of you who have to leave, thank you very much for joining us. There will be a brief survey as you exit, a very brief one. We invite you to take that, and don't forget to join us again in the future for additional virtual salons. And now for the live Q&A session, which immediately goes back to the question of collaboration. We have a question in from the NIH, and it reads, have you considered partnering with government agencies and when thinking about collaboration? I'm sure somebody has. And what are the barriers for public-private partnerships in this space? And this person is asking because of the new precision nutrition initiative underway at the NIH. Tomas, that may be something for you, and maybe then Komathi and then Chris.
Thank you so much, Sarah. So public-private partnership is indeed a very important part of what we do. And we have both with the European agencies, and we also have in the US. In particular, in development of biomarkers, I think that has been a really important aspect. And these are biomarkers for clinical trials, particularly. And I could not overestimate and grace the agency for really being proactive in finding NASH biomarkers and having collaborations in public-private partnerships around that. That has been an industry-wide appreciated initiative. So we welcome all those, and I'm happy to consider them all.
Yep. I would echo Tomas's exact comments. We are open and flexible and interested, either Noom alone or Noom in combination with a company like Novo Nordisk. Is there a way to all of us get together and improve, healthcare in these areas? So yes, absolutely, 100%.
And I would say at Gluco, we probably are powering some of these public-private partnerships. We are a platform that's used by many academic institutions to do research. And so we're in the background doing it, but we would welcome some partnerships to really accelerate some areas, specifically in the digital biomarker space. Would be very interested in that as well.
Okay, great. What I may do is ask the sender of the question if they'd like to be put in contact with you, and then I can put you in direct contact if that's acceptable. So we can circle everything back. Another question from a viewer is, obesity and metabesity is on the rise in children and teenagers, among others. Do you have a unique approach for these patients, and how is that different from the treatment and monitoring approaches for adults?
Good question. That's a great question. One of the challenges not challenges, I would say, is particularly in adolescents and teens, is they don't want to be seen as sick, right? They don't want to be seen as having a condition. So how do we provide a more normalcy to them? And at the same time, their parents often want to know how they're doing. So how do you provide oversight and data to the parent while at the same time creating privacy for the teenager? And I come back to, I think digital is a nice solution. They have some nice solutions around that. And it's also the medium in which many of these children and teenagers are playing. So we need to meet them at that same medium and make it fun and engaging for them within that medium.
Yeah. And I think, John, as when you were at Joslin, you probably dealt with that on a pretty ongoing basis, especially with type 1 diabetes patients.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But, maybe the point is, we really started to see, and I know a lot of children's hospitals are seeing really a significant number of, young people, adolescents, with or developing type 2 diabetes, which, you go back a number of years, that was never the cause or the phenomenon. So I think, there's an understanding that, we're seeing again, and it's kind of starting at an early age. And as I said earlier, it may be predisposed, even before these children are born, that they have the higher risk factors. So I think the key is to, recognize that, and again, I think it's some of the things Chris talked about. I mean, how do you really, it's a family condition. So in some ways, I've always said diabetes is a family disease. And the other part of it is how do you really, educate the whole family, because it's not like the adolescence is going to go on a different diet and the rest of the family is going to keep doing what they're doing. So, we spent a lot of time really, I think, on recognizing, how do you help the whole family, think about, managing obesity, managing diabetes, managing, kind of their lifestyle and all. And, it's complicated for sure.
Thank you very much for that answer. Does anybody else want to jump in on that?
Just a quick note.
Go ahead, please.
Just super briefly, I think when you're treating children or adolescents, you have to think about the whole family. It's not just them. It's not a single point, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's a main difference between addressing children and adolescents versus treating adults. When you're treating an adult, again, you can think about it multiple ways, but when you're treating children, you have to think about their parents, their siblings, their environments, and things like that, more so, more heavily weighted than were if they were adults. That was only a brief comment.
Right. This thread probably goes back to, this being potentially genetic and happening, even having a child be predisposed for diabetes or metabesity even before they're born, depending upon the nutrition of the mother or the family. So, okay. So
I just have to add that I think that the final evidence for that is lacking. I just want to intervene with that. I think there are studies pointing in that direction, but I to the best of my knowledge, I haven't seen it. But a very important aspect is, of course, that we should be able to pharmaceutically intervene in childhood obesity, in childhood type 2 diabetes. That is challenging doing the clinical studies in those cohorts. I just wanted to mention that. So, yeah.
Thank you for that excellent point, Tomas. Let me ping a question back at you. Will digital platforms you use have a function that tracks medication adherence for metabolic disease?
Could you repeat it, Sarah? You disappeared a little bit from me.
Oh, sorry. Will the digital platforms you use have a function that treats medication adherence for metabolic disease? Medication adherence continues to be an issue for many patients and could be addressed as part of the whole patient approach. That's a question.
Absolutely. I think the collaboration we have with Gluco is to achieve better control. Mm-hmm. The collaboration we have with Noom is to achieve exactly what you asked for. A longer, not only longer stay time, but also better compliance to the treatment, of course. And these things goes hand in hand: outcome, stay time, compliance. I think it's all about that. And unfortunately, there's such a large portion of prescribed medicines that are not used, and that's a healthcare issue in itself, I think, and we really need to have a better control of compliance and elements like what Chris and Noom does and Kumathi and Gluco does is helping this. It's too expensive healthcare already, and we need to really make use of those drugs that are prescribed.
Right. Chris and Kumathi, do either one of you want to comment on that, since your tools are designed to facilitate adherence?
Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of great companies working in the space. Everyone is trying to tackle an issue that sounds like, let's keep patients empowered, engaged, on therapy longer so they could really experience the true clinical benefits of the prescribed drugs and devices. How you do that differs by companies. We take a psychological approach and try to educate, inform, and communicate with our users and patients on the importance of medication adherence and why it's an integral part of their treatment plan and how it will help them achieve their big picture goals long term. So 100% thanks for the question. It's at the core of what we do and many others are trying to do.
Okay. Kamanthe, do you want to have it?
Sure. Yeah, we definitely are very focused on adherence, and part of gaining better adherence is providing patients with relevant insights into the data that they're generating. So at Gluco, we're constantly collecting their glucose data, their insulin data, their activity data. They might be collecting their blood pressure or weight data, all of that put together along with their food data. It starts to give them, but that's a lot of data that they have to constantly track, and we try to make it as passive as possible, but put it all together into insights of trends. Hey, you're a little low today. Is that because of what you ate earlier, or because you're active or you're exercising more? All of that put together, we can make it simple for them. Then they can start to see how adhering to their medication can make a difference. And so I think that's important to give them insight to empower them.
Can you give us an idea of what kind of success rate you have with adherence? Is it 90%? Is it 50%? Is it 63.5%?
So we have, we measure more in the outcomes. So we've been able to show that A1Cs and so forth are, A1Cs, glucose control, all of that is coming down along with hyperglycemic events. But we're also interestingly showing that when a patient stops engaging with the platform, their outcomes start to worsen within weeks of disengaging. So there's ways that we can start to actually predict when a patient is going to fall off the wagon, if you will. And so then we can intervene and improve adherence.
Perfect. Thank you.
The one other thing that I'd just like to point out is we often talk about is the patient being compliant and doing, taking their drug. But the one other thing we need to think about that sometimes patients don't refill their drugs because they can't afford to. And so we need to understand the core reason why they're not adhering. Sometimes it's a simple thing of they can't afford it or they can't get to the pharmacy to get it. There's a variety of different reasons.
Okay, thank you for that, Kamanthe.
Super important aspect, access. Thank you, Kamanthe.
So kind of the same answer for us. We are having a significant impact. There's so many different ways to slice the data up, but we're seeing it through our partnership with Novo Nordisk, an increase in refills, an increase in overall adherence. But the part we're most impressed by is consistent weight loss over time and at durable intervals. So our patients on our program with Xtenda are losing more weight. They're keeping the weight off for longer intervals, and they're staying on it longer. So it really does. The outcomes and the adherence are intimately entwined, and there's equal focus on both groups and continuing to improve and evolve the program.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Chris. Hey, John, and I want to throw this question at you. It's one I haven't heard before. It's basically this viewer asks for your thoughts on the concept of type 3 diabetes or diabetes of the brain. Have you heard of that concept?
No, I have. In fact, really Alzheimer's, or what people would call elements of vascular dementia. So in fact, for many years, there was a thought that, having diabetes, not having your blood sugars in control was certainly going to affect your heart, your liver, your peripheral organs. I mean, and for some reason, why would we think the brain would be unaffected by excess glucose? So I think there is now an appreciation that, again, it's going to change your, if you have, your vascular system is being affected, which it is by diabetes, it certainly could affect, again, vascular dementia, could be a contributing factor. I think we're still trying to understand how it links to Alzheimer's. But it is kind of funny, I think for a while there were people who were thinking to call it type 3 diabetes, but in some ways, maybe it's good that it hasn't gone there. I think it just would add more confusion. So
right.
Better to think about vascular dementia than type 3 diabetes.
That's okay. Thank you. Thank you for that. No, anybody else want to comment quickly on it? We have a lot of questions to go through. Okay. This question, I think, was partially touched on, but let's take it one more time. There is a significant rise in metabesity in the developing world. How will your program's drugs, digital therapeutics, address these populations and take cultural factors into account? That's a pretty big question.
Good question. I don't mind jumping in first. So
okay, jump in, Chris.
I mean, I could answer from a Noom perspective, and in general, translating your digital programs into multiple languages is a great start. Noom's translated into 5 different languages now, with 5 more to go. And really building up and scaling your teams internationally is a big focus for us. But when you do broaden outside of the US, you do have to take all of the cultural differences and socioeconomic differences into play. So it's a rather large undertaking. Noom's available in over 100 countries now where we have users, and we do need to adapt specifically to our users and to where they live, and to use the phrase, meet them where they're at and make it as easy as possible for them to engage on the platform.
Great, thank you for that, Chris. Anybody else?
Yeah, I'd love to take that. So Gluco, we are translated into 15 languages, and we're in 26 countries right now. However, I think the developing world is an interesting problem in that many patients may not have access to a clinic, they may not have access to a computer, but they may have access to a smartphone, believe it or not. And so that is a medium in which Gluco can really reach them and offer a solution. And Gluco actually integrates into over 200 diabetes devices, including the really old meters that weren't connected. And those are the ones that are often being used in the developing world. And we have a solution in which to be able to get the data from those devices as well. So we can provide care within the context of what that standard of care is in those countries in a very cost-effective manner. And I agree that obviously you have to translate into the language, but also some of the cultural norms of that country for medicine as well has to be taken into consideration.
I might just say, though, I mean, again, I think we've seen over the last 20 years, I mean, we did a lot of work at Jocelyn. I mean, many parts of the world, even in the Brazilian rainforest, basically the nature of the foods that the indigenous people were eating has all changed. Now they're eating much more processed, kind of packaged foods. And not surprisingly, there's a corresponding increase in obesity. You're seeing a similar phenomenon in India, all throughout Southeast Asia, South America. So it is kind of this, as countries have prospered further, or the lifestyle and the type of foods and the way that basically those societies are operating is driving a lot of obesity, which drives a lot of diabetes. And I'm sure it's driving other elements of metabesity. So it's really been exploding in the last handful of years. I think right now we're up to 465 million people globally with diabetes. I mean, crazy numbers that aren't slowing down.
I have to echo what you said, John. It's very important that, and this is seen in the skyrocketing type 2 diabetes in the cities in particular. We see this in development countries in the cities. And we have an initiative, we call it Changing Diabetes, that we do focus on a number of cities that are experiencing this skyrocketing or close to explosive increase in type 2 diabetes. So it's very important, the education of it. And I also would like to add that we need to think a little bit more about the patients on the bottom of the pyramid that only have money to buy one dose of a medicine every day. And this is an issue. And we've been, and we're certainly not the only one, but we've been struggling and scratching our head on how to provide access to those. That's not a trivial thing that's needed.
Really important, Tomas. So we have a few more minutes left, and we have more questions than we can possibly get to. One question circles back to the type 3 diabetes discussion, and it's please connect the dots between diabetes and aging.
Yeah, may I start on this one?
Please do.
It's not an easy thing. I mean, we clearly see that mild cognitive dysfunction is linked to type 2 diabetes in the elderly patient population. That there is a link there. I agree with John's comment before that it's a vascular disease, and that's probably the issue, but we don't know. And I think it's important that we have to do more research. And you have followed the field of exploring the link and the use of anti-diabetic drugs in treating cognitive dysfunction. I probably also read the results from the LAD study that was a principal investigator sponsored study that we took part of. And you know, it's not easy to interpret the results. We need to do more research in this. We need to understand what is healthy aging, including cognitive dysfunction.
Absolutely. I want to get there. I want to age health with health. So I think all of us do. John,
but don't forget, Sarah, I mean, the cardiovascular is still the number one issue that we have to deal with first, you know, so we shouldn't.
And metabesity affects that. So, correct.
But I think, you know, the point is, and again, I think, as Tomas said, a lot more research is needed. But, you know, I think there's a building appreciation that aging, longevity is connected to, you know, metabolic function. And there's some evidence that as visceral fat is increased, and again, it varies across the world because a lot of people in Asia, you know, don't look obese, but they have an increase in visceral fat. And that tends to basically lead to an increase in senescent cells, which have an impact on aging. So again, it's part of this kind of domino effect where one thing starts leading to other things. And surprisingly, in some of these areas, we just don't know. No one's ever kind of looked at, you know, kind of the linkages, if you will.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, John. Hey, Emmy, I want to ask this question of you, you know, specifically because of the nature of Joyanne's partners and social starts. And I don't know if this fits into your portfolio completely. The question is there a role for medical foods in the management of metabesity?
Yeah, absolutely. And we do a lot of work with medical foods and how it affects different kinds of indications and diseases. We do have a company in our portfolio, Celeria, that is actually doing precisely that. And they're working also with menopausal and perimenopausal women as well, using medical foods for that. So I think that there definitely is a role. Nutrition plays a big role and a big part in metabesity. Medical foods does. And medical foods, you know, takes a more physiological approach to tackling diabetes and obesity and different kinds of diseases and indications related to metabesity. And so I think that there's definitely a huge potential there. And one of these parts to the whole of treating the whole patient.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much for that. We have gone over time a bit. I do want to, we will end right now. I do want to thank you, Emmy, for, you know, hosting this and moderating this. Thank you so very much for that. John, Tomas, Kamanthi, and Chris, thank you very much for joining us and sharing your wisdom and knowledge with everybody who's participating with us today. Unfortunately, we could not get to every question, but I hope we had a good variety of them so that we touched on a number of different aspects. I do want to thank our audience. As you depart, you will be prompted to participate in a survey. Please do. Please do continue to check back on our website for upcoming salons. We do want to thank our sponsors always. They're really quite important to us. And our next salon is going to take place on November 18th, and it will focus on the unexpected long-term cardiovascular complications from COVID-19. So therefore, everybody, please, thank you so very much. Stay safe, and we look forward to seeing you again. Stay safe most of all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Bye now.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.